today. Why are you here today?
Sure. So, for me, Julian's case is so important at so many different levels. I've investigated, researched, written about, made films about the global arms trade for over 22 years now. And our mainstream media used to do a little bit about it, but haven't done anything meaningful about it for years. And Julian has always been the key truth teller when it comes to the global trade in weapons, its consequences for innocent people around the world, its consequences for our own democracies, for the rule of law, for corruption, etc., etc. And, the WikiLeaks model of publishing really effectively showed up the mainstream media for what it is. So I think that's the primary reason. But the other reason that I'm here is this is a case against journalism. And, what Julian is suffering as an individual, he's doing on behalf of all of us. And so I think it's incredibly important that we show solidarity with him, that we point out to people that not only is journalism not a crime, but speaking the truth is actually a responsibility. And Julian symbolizes that more than anybody I can probably think of or that I know. So for all of those reasons, I feel, very honored to be here, just to add my voice to so many extraordinary people from around the world who've come to show their solidarity and support for him. But I think what is happening here today is also reflective of the state of the world and the state of our governments. Because the reason that Julian is sitting inside that court, the reason that he's been sitting in a high security jail for all of these years, is because if he wasn't, it's our politicians who would be. Because he reveals the corrupt truth about the way in which they use conflict in Gaza, in Yemen, to effectively line their own pockets. Be it contributions to their political parties, be it to individual politicians. We've seen Tony Blair make hundreds of millions of pounds personally, directly out of the decision to invade Iraq, directly out of his association with British and American arms companies. And this is everything that Julian's life's work has revealed and exposed. So by having him in high security jail, by having him in court, by extraditing him to the United States of America, what they are effectively doing is trying to keep themselves out of the jails that they belong in.
100%. Beautifully put as well.
And then finally, if I can also just say, as a South African, I had the enormous privilege of serving under Nelson Mandela. And I know that Stella has connections to South Africa. And she reminds me of the very best of South Africa in the sense of during the struggle for liberation from apartheid, we used to say, you strike the women, you strike the rock. Because women have always been the most resilient in our struggle. And Stella, to me, encapsulates so much of that. The courage and the fortitude and the perseverance that she has shown over these terrible, terrible years to raise those two incredible young boys on her own as she's been forced to do. To continue to campaign around the world in the way that she has reminds me so much of the legends of our political struggle in South Africa. And so I think it's important also, given the role that South Africa has played recently in relation to Gaza and in relation to the International Court of Justice, to say here today that South Africa is calling out Israel. It's calling out a genocide in Gaza. And we would know even more about that genocide if Julian was free and doing the work that he has done his whole life. And I think there are many in South Africa as a consequence who hold both Stella and Julian in extraordinarily high esteem, who believe that South Africa is in solidarity with Julian at this awful moment. And really, Nelson Mandela, my former boss, spoke about the reality when he came out of jail after 27 years in an apartheid jail. He said, our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinian people. I think today we need to say that our freedom is incomplete without Julian's freedom, because we cannot live in functioning democracies. We cannot hold our politicians accountable. We cannot eradicate corruption that is largely driven by conflict around the world. Because the arms trade accounts for 40% of all corruption in world trade, without acknowledging the work that WikiLeaks has done in making us all aware of how our political systems thrive on warfare and conflict, thrive on the suffering of millions. We have a situation of permanent austerity in the Western world, but that's because we're spending over $2.2 trillion a year on conflict and warfare. So for all of those reasons, Julian must be free. And for every single day that he is not, it's an indictment on our governments, on our politicians, and on the state of the world today.
Beautiful.